Electricity was as large, or let's say perhaps larger, a technological advancement, the use of it, that is, than what AI is today. And it took 3 decades, a full 3 decades, before electricity was adopted and adapted and accepted throughout the world. And when that first company, and we could use a grocery store, if a grocery store started using electricity for lights, right? They could keep their doors open longer. They could include electrical fans and some type of refrigeration and heat inside. That grocery store did not become an electric company simply because it started using electricity. So in a similar vein, companies today that are using AI that call themselves an AI company, it's a misnomer for 99% of the companies out there. AI will end up being a footnote. It's going to be a tool, a commodity, just as electricity has been. So let's go back over 100 years ago. The company that adopted electricity on day one ended up being 30 years ahead of their competitors that didn't adopt electricity until the end of that 3-decade period. And we're at the same position with AI.
Welcome to the Hitchhiker's Guide to AI Governance, the podcast for anyone trying to make sense of intelligent machines, messy politics, and everything in between. Don't panic. Today I'm in the far reaches of the galaxy speaking with Derek Crager. Derek is a visionary AI solutions architect and founder of Practical AI. Practical AI helps businesses embrace simple, ethical, and profitable uses of artificial intelligence to amplify workforce capability. Derek created Pocket Mentor, the world's first voice-based AI mentor for any hands-free, eyes-free, real-time support for on-the-job frontline workers in building maintenance. So welcome to the pod, Derek. You're a Hoosier all the way from Indiana in the US of A.
I am indeed. It's I don't know if I'm talking to the future or talking to the past or vice versa for you. So I'm just glad to be here and thank you for having me on, Bruce.
Yeah, thank you. And does the term Hoosier resonate with you?
Yeah. It's been the word has been around for quite some time. There's some myth and speculation and folklore onto its origination, but one of our universities here has latched on to it as their identity. The Indiana Hoosiers, which just by the way, last year won the National College Football Championship here in U.S. And when I say football, I mean the game you play with your hands.
Yeah, that's the one. So whereabouts in Indiana are you?
Well, it's Indiana's central United States. And if people know where Chicago is one of our biggest cities. I'm south of Chicago, about a 3-hour drive.
Okay. And one thing I did notice when I was doing some research is that Indiana's got 2 time zones. How does that happen and how do you navigate that?
Well, yeah, we adopted daylight savings in around 2000. And when we adopted that, we moved into the eastern time zone of the continent 100%. But we have a couple big cities, one down in Kentucky, the state below us, and then Chicago, which is actually shares a border with Indiana, but they remained on central time zone. So it's around those two big cities that the time takes precedence because a lot of workers actually live in Indiana and work across the state border.
Okay. That's very, very interesting. So Derek, what's the DC, the Derek Crager story? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I one of those opportunities that I can share that my life wasn't gifted to me. That's for sure. I spent a lot of time in the self-help aisle growing up, trying to find tools to better adapt to conversation, uh, understanding context, and just getting along with people, type of thing. It turns out that around age 50, that's 50, I was diagnosed with HD, autism, and dyslexia. So that kind of explains the round peg and the square hole fit. I tried to go to university and work at the same time. I lived on my own out of high school, but that didn't work. So I ended up following through the trades path and did a lot of industrial factory building. I helped build some factories for Ford, GM, Chrysler, a pharmaceutical, Eli Lilly, their insulin facility that's local. And then I spent about 20 years overall in the automotive manufacturing. And then ultimately, I ended up at Amazon, which Amazon.com. I worked on the reliability team on the education side, which falls under HR. And the feather in my cap, Bruce, is that I built Amazon's highest rated employee training program in their company history. So that's my takeaway. Stumbled through life, I learned some things, and then I shared those with others. And hopefully, it's been a positive return for everyone.
Yeah. So when you did receive that diagnosis at age 50, what did that mean to you? What was the result of getting that?
Well, my mind's always been analytical. So if there's not a logical reason for something, well then I'm not looking hard enough, I'm not looking in the right place. So 40 or 50 years of self-help trying to apply tools that fit to the quote unquote normal people. They helped. I pulled some things out of it, but they didn't quite fit me directly. Kind of like comparing imperial measurement with metric measurement. We can find a close fit, but it's not going to be quite right. So that diagnosis allowed me to just understand that I was just looking in the wrong aisle. I was pointed in the right direction, but now I knew I could find some tools that would directly fit with me, my life, and the work that I do.
Yeah. And what's that meant for you having that change?
It's been a big relief. I've carried a lot of weight the first 50 years of my life just trying to fit in. I would prepare answers during conversations, whether it be personal conversations or work conversations, because I knew there was always this opportunity for disconnect. In leadership training, we talk about intent versus impact. And the things that I intended to be had a different impact. So in my mind, I would always salvage two or three alternative answers. That way I could just quick, oh, no, no, that's not what I meant. I meant this. I'm saying the same information, but just in a different way. And so just learning about this and having these tools, it allowed me to understand myself better, to understand others better. And to be frank, it was a good anchor in the foundation, a cornerstone in the foundation, would be more apropos, I guess, on the training that I provided at Amazon itself.
Wow. So tell me a little bit about working with Amazon. Did you get to meet the famous Jeff Bezos, and what was the culture like at an organization like a big tech company like Amazon?
Well, I will start off by saying that to you and all your listeners, everything you heard about Amazon is true, the good, the bad, the beautiful, and there's pockets. So I experienced both the positive and the negative, but overall, the people that were there have good hearts, good minds, and they were building something better. And that was always their passion. And it was great to work at that high level with that intensity and being surrounded by people that were all looking to cross that finish line together. And so it it was a beautiful thing. I really enjoyed my time there.
Yeah, wow. And so what would be your number one superpower, Derek? What's your strength?
My strength, ironically, or maybe this is just where I ended up. They say if you ask God for patience, he'll give you plenty opportunity to practice. So I think my entire life has been a practice in learning patience. And now here at this end of my life, instead of the beginning, I'm much more patient and I give shadow of the doubt to others because maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they have this pain they've been carrying around that could be in their bones, in their brain. That's an 8 out of 10 on the pain scale. That's the question doctors ask sometimes. And I used to tell people, at least in my training, so that I get mad at myself for not having opportunity to get mad at. And I think that's really the patience combined with understanding that we're all different. And so we're like pieces. I find it a challenge on how we can work together rather than how we can push each other away.
So let's take the conversation to AI now. How do you see AI unfolding in the US?
Well, there's this polarization. One side believes that AI is a godsend. It's going to answer all of our questions, make life super easy. And then there's the other pole where there's a group that says AI is going to take my job, AI is going to replace. people going to replace humans, and that's just bad. My philosophy is human first AI. And that means let's use AI to support the workers that are already here. And because they're the ones that made the companies great already. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, as my grandfather used to tell me. And let's use AI to support the people that are doing the good work to begin with. It allows humans to accomplish greater skills, and it also allows companies at the same time to save the money that they're looking.
So in that continuum between, hey, AI is going to be all things and be fantastic versus, hey, I'm going to lose my job and I'm never going to work again kind of thinking, I'm of a similar view that AI is going to be enormous. It's going to be transformative, and it's going to be an opportunity of a lifetime for people who have got discernment and judgment and can work with the technology. The piece that I find that's really interesting is that finding out where it will settle. Where will the level of human computer interaction, if you take a simple job. At the moment, 0% of that job is using AI. Eventually, it'll be 10%, then 20%, and then it might be 50% of that role is replaced with AI, but the other 50% relies on the human judgment and the value adding that the human can provide. If you think back to all these technological changes that we've had over the years, and you would have been around during the dot-com, during the internet boom, you would have been around for email when that first came around. What are you seeing historically versus what's happening now, and where do you see AI eventually landing?
Well, technological advancement, and I'm glad you included the internet there. The internet was introduced to individuals, the consumer side, and even businesses really didn't start using it until about 1989. And it wasn't until 2006 was about the tipping point where it was received and accepted. So that was a 17-year gap where is it good? Is it bad? Similar conversations as we're having today. And what I'd like to do, let's take you and all your listeners and viewers right now, and let's go back further. Let's go back over 100 years. Let's take that scenario you mentioned, a job that begins with zero AI and eventually maybe 10%, then 20% AI, then 30% AI, et cetera. Where does it end? Will it end? Is AI going to take over the world? Well, over 100 years ago, electricity was as large, or let's say perhaps larger, a technological advancement, the use of it, that is, than what AI is today. And it took 3 decades, a full 3 decades, before electricity was adopted and adapted and accepted throughout the world. And when that first company, and we could use a grocery store. If a grocery store started using electricity for lights, right? They could keep their doors open longer. They could include electrical fans and some type of refrigeration and heat inside. That grocery store did not become an electric company simply because it started using electricity. So in a similar vein, companies today that are using AI that call themselves an AI company, it's a misnomer for 99% of the companies out there. AI will end up being a footnote. It's going to be a tool, a commodity, just as electricity has been. And I'm not one to bribe people or push people or talk people into using AI or adopting AI. I'm one that wants to talk about the education of what's going to happen with AI and who's going to make the right decisions. So let's go back over 100 years ago. The company that adopted electricity on day one ended up being 30 years ahead of their competitors that didn't adopt electricity until the end of that 3 decade period. And we're at the same position with AI. The same thing happened with the .com. We had some very large companies that realized that they weren't that large unless they adopted the internet in the right way and the user space the same way. AI is going to be that big change medium. So I push for education. I think that if we educate ourselves and our companies that we work with, that we're going to have a better position and better stand on what tomorrow is going to look like. We can't just bury our head in the sand and say it'll go away, because that's going to allow the decision makers to be someone other than ourselves.
Derek, that's a really brilliant analogy. The notion that, electricity took 30 years to get going, the internet took 17 years to get going. AI will take a period of time to get going. And those companies that embrace it now will have that, I guess, head start on a lot of those organizations before they'll catch up. So, what was going through my mind then was that it's ironic that you've come from Amazon because the internet and the dot-com boom laid the foundations for companies like Amazon. And Amazon was one of those early companies into e-commerce.
Well, Amazon, the company, the product company, they started out as a book sales back in 1995, tried a couple different names at the turn, and then they just grew product after product after product. The biggest insight that Jeff Bezos gave when others were saying, "Why the internet? Why are you getting on the internet?" He said, "Well, the internet usage is growing at 20,000% a year, and he just wants to be there when those users, those customers show up." And he was. That's how he laid the game plan. There's a bit of a tie-in on Amazon with the neurodivergent community. Back in 1995, Amazon was mostly neurodivergents coming together for a single cause. Back before Amazon was the corporate giant that it is today, it was just about people getting together and doing good, using their individual superpowers, their talents to grow something better. My time at Amazon itself, when I was building the program for our department didn't have that type of program. I think before I started the training program for our reliability team, which was about 35,000 people in North America at the time. We were grooming incomers to double that number from 35,000 to 70,000 people. And those were the people that I trained. And so it was interesting. We had an 83% attrition rate prior to the training, prior to the onboarding, prior to the understanding. And a good majority of the content supported the strategy and mission that Amazon had from day one, 1995. And it was, we're all different. Let's acknowledge that. That's the elephant in the room. And now let's just work around it. I cover your blind spot, you cover mine. And that's the influence that Amazon had from day one to the time I was there. I will say that after I got the program built, I'm a builder. I'm not much of an administrator. So once it got to the time where the program was being consistent year after year, I, I got bored. I just had to take my
Mm.
talents elsewhere, and I departed. We departed on great terms. Lots of great people still work there and have adapted to other companies that I stay in contact with. But overall, Amazon has been doing a great method of supporting their original vision and strategy.
Fantastic. You mentioned that AI will be something that will humans can use to be better humans, right? That they can use the tools and be more effective in their jobs and provide better value and better services because it's taking away some of those things that take away a lot of people's time. So if there's people out there who are listening to this podcast and are worried about AI, what could you teach them? What would be your advice to people?
I would say education is key. Learn yourself. If you've never touched AI, jump on a free ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity and just share with it enough information that you feel comfortable with. Don't go any farther and just learn about it. From the larger scheme, the macroeconomics is telling us that the world's going to be better off after a technology is introduced. The same thing happened with the internet. The same thing happened with electricity. The world is better off. And each of those progressions, humans have actually ended up working less. Quality of life has gone up after each of those technological advancements. And here's the however. Here's what people are scared of. And they have a right to be in the microeconomic perspective because there are going to be jobs that are dismissed. There are going to be jobs that are replaced. The neat thing about today is that all this technology gives us the leverage and the power to learn much more quickly. And let's be honest, when my dad and grandfather and everybody before them had a career, they would work 30, 40, even 50 years for a single company and retire from that company. Great wages, great benefits. But that hasn't been that way for, I don't know, 25 or 30 years now. We have been a society globally that we're used to working maybe 5 years at the most before we change jobs of our own volition. Maybe we get tired of one job, maybe we see opportunity. So I would say leverage that adaptability. And if you're in one of those microeconomic impact areas where AI is going to come in, then just be aware that you're going to need to pivot a little bit sooner, maybe a little bit harder. Overall, there's a correlation with telephone operators back in the 1940s, 1950s, et cetera, when computers took over the job that humans used to physically connect cables. So you would pick up a handset, your grandmother would pick up a handset, there would be a human on every call that would connect those two through a patch cable. And AT&T and Ameritech, whatever company name, that was leading the telephone game back then, they said we're going to use computers, and it was a similar scare. Headlines read, millions are going to lose their jobs. Well, they found out that those that lost their jobs had better jobs and were more happy and more successful within a 5-year period. So just know that if humans are involved, 2 out of 3 times, we're taking a step forward. 1 out of 3 times, we're gonna take a step back, and that's okay because every time we take a step forward, we have a new perspective and we can learn. Coming from the automotive manufacturing side of the world here, Ford Motor Company dismissed. They laid off an entire design team looking to replace them with AI. They saw what happened, they took measurements, read the data, and then realized that they can't replace humans. So they brought all those people back. It gave them opportunity to introduce AI in that AI supportive role to the employees. And it's okay to trial as long as we expect to learn from something. And if we learn from something and we take appropriate action, we're all going to be okay.
That's to the similar story to one that I heard about recently of a company called Klarna. Now, Klarna provides a payment service where you can pay in full rather than pay up front. It's a Swedish company, and their customer service team was 100% human. And they dismissed 700 jobs because they could replace the humans, or they believe they could replace the humans with AI chatbots handling customer service queries. But what happened was the AI couldn't handle the complex, difficult customer service cases that the humans were good at negotiating. And because the system was set up so that it was being measured based on customer satisfaction scores, if somebody had a problem and they complained, the AI would generate a refund because that would give them a high satisfaction score. And so what they were measuring was these satisfaction scores that were being driven by an empathetic response from a robot that would generate a refund. And they ended up spending, I think, $2.5 million in unauthorized refunds because the AI was taking that path instead of trying to resolve these complex cases. And so they brought the humans back, as you said that they did at Ford. And now they're using a human AI hybrid model where the simple basic stuff is being done by the AI, and then there's a diversion to a human for the more complex cases, including refunds. So these stories are really emerging around, hey, let's replace all these humans with robots. But the world's complex. It's not as simple and as deterministic as we think. And so it's going to be some kind of hybrid model to be the most successful. And that's where what you're talking about is, bringing that human judgment, human intuition, human discernment into the organization. And it's one of the things I heard recently that was very powerful. It's not the AI that's going to replace you. It's the person that knows AI better than you. And that's what is really important for people to understand is that, as you said earlier, the more they can get their hands dirty and understand these tools, the less they'll be fearful of them, the more confidence they'll get with them, and more that they can apply them to their own jobs. And if, in some respects, disrupt themselves before the AI does. So that's a very positive story, Derek. What else are you seeing on the human side of AI in the US? What else is front and center at the moment?
Well, there's talk of software developers being displaced by AI. AI is handling everything. And even companies like OpenAI and well, Anthropic, they are bragging about that much of their new code is written by AI itself. The big companies, the big tech companies like the Metas, the Googles, the Apples, the Microsofts make headlines when they lay off 10,000 people, 40,000 people, etc. And because it's a big impact. So the inclination or the natural tendency is to say anybody in this career path is no longer going to have that career path. And if we look over the last 12 months, I apologize in advance. I don't have that article handy, but in 2 months ago, I read an article from somebody high up in the computer realm that was saying that the actual numbers, let's take away from the big companies on their one-time layoffs, but software developers have actually increased employee. It's because AI is allowing more people to become adept at the job of software development. It's the fact that sometimes a good software developer is good on as a front end developer, but not a back end or vice versa. So they can use AI to complement what they're doing. They can be purely creative. Imagine the most creative person in the world not having to second guess themselves. If they could just create and go down that path, and then we had a bunch of robots that came up behind them and straightened up, did some housekeeping. They could focus on creating and doing new and let the AI housekeepers straighten up the code, lay it out properly, fix gaps, even security gaps, that sort of thing. And that's the inclination with every revolution that's gone on, at least the ones I remember from the history books. The agricultural revolution. Once upon a time, it took one family to grow food to feed two families. And so just simple math means that half of the world was working as farmers or some type of agriculture. I don't know about you, Bruce, but I'm glad I don't have to row my own corn every day. I'm glad that I don't have to worry about pests and rodents and droughts because we've used these efficiencies to create more food than we've ever had in the world's lifetimes. And now that abundance has brought the cost down and it's allowed humans to do other creative things. And every advancement we have a equilateral advancement in creative jobs. For example, once upon a time, there was no such thing as a podcast host. And now here we are, right? The internet gave us a new platform, gave us new tools, and AI is has done the same thing, continues to do the same thing. And there are jobs and roles that aren't even defined yet that we'll learn about in the next 5 years.
Yeah, well, what you were talking about regarding the software developers being displaced is commonly referred to as, I think it's Jensen's paradox. And it goes back to the 1800s when boot making was automated. So originally boots were hand sewn by people. And then when the automation came and the machines took over the sewing, what happened was that because the company could produce more boots and cheaper boots, more people could afford boots. And so the market for boots grew. And so all the people that were previously working as boots stitching were still employed because they were busy enough to keep those people and to work side by side with the automation of the stitching of the boots. So it's the market grew and to absorb those jobs. And so the people who were fearful that they would never work again, well, the actual opposite happened. They became in demand because there was more demand for what they were actually producing. The crystal ball that we all wish we had in hindsight. But what are you seeing in 5 years, Derek? What would it look like once this AI is settled in and people are using it? What do you think you might see?
I believe that we're going to abandon at least the prioritization of AGI, the all-encompassing one entity knows everything, because it's impossible. It's infinite in all directions. They spent a bunch of money to chase AGI and they fell on their teeth and they eventually just folded that program, at least in its priority and complexity, within 60 days. What I see in the next 5 years is AI at the user level and just just go through, and I'd ask your listeners and viewers to do so right now. Close your eyes and just picture yourself throughout your day. When you wake up in the morning, you've got your alarm clocks, you've got your house security, perhaps. Maybe you go grab a coffee or a tea on your way to work. Once you get to work, you want to be apprised on who's doing what and when. And if we look at an AI that's embedded in every device that we come across, something that is specific to that one device, it's like a genie in a lamp that's going to answer questions that it's trained on, and only that. So it's going to give us the right answers. It's not even going to have the wrong answers to deliver to us. And if each individual on Earth interacts with, I don't know, just 10 devices, 10 types of devices in a day, and it's much more than that. We're talking billions and even approaching a trillion different AI entities out there that are technologically, they might be considered edge use or edge case. Everything's happening on the device rather than burning up data centers to doing the big complex stuff. And because we fine tune it into its simplicity, each AI is going to have one job and it's going to do it right. And that's how I see the next 5 years going is that growth in that area.
Like fragmentation in a way, because specialization will occur. So that you're seeing that now. It's starting now. So we're getting AI use cases specialized for finance, AI use cases specialized for marketing, for HR, and to solve one problem, but do it really, really well. I wrote about invoice automation this week and a project that I was on. And so one of the things I think about when I look at the next 5 years is trying to automate processes. So if you think of you've got the AI, which might be about this big, but if you do have the organization, which is huge, and you're trying to use the AI to automate a process within an organization. One of the problems that you'll find is that the process that they're trying to automate is actually broken. And there's a lot of things that need to happen first for the AI to be successful. So in this project that I did a year or so ago, where you would think AI and invoice automation would go hand in hand because, it's a very straightforward process. Invoices don't have a lot of information. They're pretty simple. You would also think that it's a repeatable process and that you're doing the same thing over and over again, and it's predictable. Once we started looking at the problem the AI was solving was, the process wasn't as predictable and wasn't as stable and wasn't as deterministic as we originally thought with the technology that's available today to replace that process. So you might have a small piece, which is the technology, but then you've got this huge piece of all the things around it that need to change. So, for example, in this case, we were working with suppliers. Now, we asked them to put certain information on an invoice so the machine could read it. And that information might be a cost center code, for example. Something fairly simple like that, Derek, you would think would be fairly straightforward for a supplier to provide on an invoice. And I was astounded by the difficulty that we found in working with our suppliers to make some simple, what we believe was simple changes so that we could have the information we needed on an invoice for when the machine had to read it. So that we could code it correctly for finance purposes. So you would think that that would be a fairly simple thing to apply, right? It wasn't that simple. The other problem that we had was in Australia, part of our regulations are that you can't invoice a site. You must invoice to a legal entity. So for an organisation that has got hundreds of sites around Australia, in order for that organisation to manage those invoices, they got the supplier to invoice directly to the site name. Now, that's a breach of our tax regulations here in Australia because you can't invoice a site name. They're not a legal entity. It must be the legal entity, but we need to put the site name on the invoice so we can track it properly. We know that invoice was for that site. That adoption curve might be 17 years for the internet, 30 years for electricity. I think a lot of things have to catch up for the AI to be eminently successful. And so the people that are adopting it now are getting a little bit of a head start but they're building AI solutions that will still have some degree of workaround in them because the context and the environment in which they're being deployed is not quite ready yet for them. So that's one of the things that I'm seeing over the next 5 years is there'll be this hybrid model of partial deployment of AI, partial workarounds, human oversight, till eventually everything catches up, and then there'll be a bigger proportion of AI being used. And you will have heard of the technology adoption curve, right? So that plateau of discontentment, and then all of a sudden things go whoosh when everybody sees the power and it's stable and it's working well, and the early adopters step aside for the early majority to jump on board, and then the late majority, and then everyone's using it. So, and then you've got your laggards. There's still people out there still aren't even using the internet, right? So there will be a multi-horse race over the next 5 years of some people backing the early adoption horse, others waiting for things to settle down and stabilize, and for those who are just in denial and don't think it will ever affect them. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about with your background of working in Amazon and large companies, one of the things that I'm seeing is that the organizations that are in denial, that don't think there's AI is being used in their organization. If you look at all the technology that companies are using now, they've got a finance system, they're using marketing systems, they're using HR systems. Now, all of those vendors are deploying AI modules into those solutions. So, as you said earlier, the staff who are being proactive are starting to use it themselves. So they've got the free AI tools that they can use online, and they can do part of their work using those tools today if they like. So there's a lot of companies out there who are thinking, we're not really using AI, we're not really ready for it. But the problem that they've got is it's happening to them, not by them. And that staff and the vendors are pushing this technology into front and center of organizations that are not quite ready for it yet. And then if I talk to somebody, I say, how many AI systems are you using in your company? They say maybe 3, but the reality is they're probably using 30. It's probably 10 times that many because they're probably using Teams, and Teams is using AI to record the meeting and to create a summary and to create meeting notes. They're using Copilot in their Outlook, which is then summarizing responses to an email. They're using AI in their finance system because it's probably matching receipts in the bank to invoices issued, performing that what used to be a human matching process. So if you ask anybody how much AI you're using and they say to you 3, well, you probably need to multiply it by 10. So there's a quite underlying adoption of AI that's going on right under our noses. But I don't think a lot of companies are actually aware of it. What are you seeing in that space?
Well, I agree with you 100%,
Yeah,
Bruce. I think you're
yeah,
spot on.
yeah.
The I think the best use of AI is that which you cannot see. Just like that electricity analogy, as long as us humans have a house where we can stay warm in the winter and cool in the summer, and maybe run a refrigerator and our stereo and our TVs and radios and all that, we're happy. We see the end result because it affects us directly. But the infrastructure, the stuff that governments and municipalities have to regulate to make sure that the roads are there so that electricity can be delivered to each of our houses. That's a layer beyond our immediate knowledge. And that's what's going on right now for sure. And we want that to happen. When the internet came about, the internet actually helped build out physical infrastructure that made not just the internet available to everybody, but it improved telephone lines, it improved electricity across the grids. If we look at the companies and enterprise that are throwing AI as a solution to a problem they haven't recognized, you're going to stumble into the reasoning behind MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In 2025, they said 95% of all corporate AI has zero ROI, meaning there's nothing profitable from it. They updated those numbers this last spring in 2026 as well. And it really comes down to, and you were talking about it earlier, if you have a problem, address the problem in its most empirical sense. Occam's razor comes to mind, right? Don't don't throw a solution out there simply because it's got a cool title to it. And if you ask the common person walking down the street, when was the electric car invented? Well, they might say 2010, 2005, 2000. Yeah, it was 100 years earlier because when electricity took 3 decades to be adopted and adapted across the globe, people were throwing electricity as a solution for everything. And at the time, they said, "Hey, why not build an electric car?" And they built electric cars. But the thing was, the battery technology wasn't up to date. So they had to park that. They tried it. Whoever tried it, it cost them money. There's that risk versus reward. My childhood stories, the rabbit and the turtle, or the hare and the turtle having their race. Okay. The hare or the rabbit is going quick. It's the early adopter, wants to try everything, zigzag, zoom, boom. It's going to have the highest risk, but it's also going to have the highest reward. And say that another way, when you're going for the highest reward, you expose yourself to the highest risk. And on the flip side, what did we learn? What was the moral to that story? As the turtle goes, slow and steady wins the race. And I think that's interesting because for decades, the only company I was aware of that was working on AI was IBM. And today, how many technology companies are large or larger than IBM that are just a couple years old because they have the biggest risk, but they also have the biggest reward? IBM laid the groundwork at the foundation. There's that quote, nobody ever got fired by buying IBM. That's because they knew IBM equipment would work, hands
Mm,
down. It's just not going to be the quickest to market. So it's a choice, and I think you and I are here in this airspace right now to educate people so they can make that choice for themselves.
yeah. Hey, couple of things, Derek, I wanted to confirm with you. Occam's razor, the definition of that, it's something around, I believe it's the most obvious solution to a problem is the right one. Is it something along those lines? What's the background to Occam's razor?
The easiest solution is probably the right solution.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. Yeah, you got it. And IBM. Yeah, the three initials IBM. Have you seen a movie 2001, A Space Odyssey?
Great movie. It kind of
Yes.
predicted where we're at now, don't you think?
Yes. Well, the computer's name in that movie was what?
Hal?
HAL. Now, if you move one letter to the right in the alphabet of HAL, what do you have?
Oh my God. There's IBM. Hey,
Did you
thank you
know
for
that?
introducing that to me. Did not. I did not.
That's how they came up with the name. It was
Wow.
HAL, but one letter moved forward. And International Business Machines, all of that stuff, that was all just made up. It originated from that movie. And the iPad came out of that movie as well, if you remember. If you look
Well,
closely, you'll see an iPad right there.
I'm learning so much from you today. This is impressive. I
Yeah.
appreciate this.
Yes, that's a good one to know. So now I want to learn something from you. I want to learn about this Pocket Mentor. What was the idea? What triggered you to build this Pocket Mentor? What was the spark?
Well, it's human first AI is my philosophy. Pocket Mentor is the productized version of that philosophy. You already mentioned my company name, Practical AI. I'm not looking to showboat, not looking to gain headlines, looking to do things that work. So Pocket Mentor is named that way because it sits on your telephone, your mobile, and it's as easy as making a telephone call. Now you can make that telephone call by dialing numeric digits, or you can tap the button and do the voice over IP connection, and you're talking to this anthropomorphized voice that is a proxy for subject matter experts in their field. And just like your story about the boots, if we make it available to everybody, we democratize this knowledge, make it more accessible, more people will use it, and the result is going to be better for every employee using it. And so that's what Pocket Mentor is. It's a method, and I believe in simplicity. I like to throw in at some point during a conversation Google.com. Google.com is a search engine that took power away from all the early search engines. There's very few search engines that can be named other than Google today because Google was so simple, right? And it still is. You go to google.com and it's just a box. You type in something, you click a button. It's easy to understand. It's easy to activate and utilize. And so Pocket Mentor is the same way. It does not require enterprise companies to buy new computers. It does not require companies to buy data services or data farms. It does not even require a integration into the local intranet within the system. So there's the ability to deliver results for minimal cost. And I do it this way because in supporting human first AI, I think if we can introduce AI at a zero cost point versus hundreds of millions and billions of dollars, that gives companies incentive more so to retain their employees rather than replace them.
So, what would be a use case? I've got this device in my pocket. It's a mentor. Like, what would be the situation where I could use it?
Well, my background being industrialization, manufacturing, et cetera, it's for frontline workers that are actually out there doing the work. That's those human brains and hands and eyes and ears that are pounding the pavement every day, boots on the ground, you can call it. For these people, success happens when they can perform their duties. Those duties are outlined in an SOP, a standard operating procedure. And in addition to knowing the process, these individuals also need to know the equipment that they're working with, any updates to the equipment, any changes, etc. And there's always a learning curve that somebody on the line doesn't know everything. And most of the time, it's just the reverse, right? There's only one person in an organization that traditionally knows everything. And I'm throwing up some invisible air quotes here. And that's the subject matter expert. They are
Mm.
so good at what they do, they've been pulled off the line just so they can help train other people. So, in order to train people, companies have to put themselves at a disadvantage by pulling their best work. So, if you can imagine 2 a.m. on a Saturday at a Ford manufacturing facility, you have an electrician that comes in that's been on the job 6 months. They know what they're doing. They've been trained. They have experience, but they don't have experience on this specific line, on this specific device, on this specific problem. So what they tend to do, they call around to see who's on the job, if they've come across this problem. And if it is, they have a conference and they walk them through it. More likely, especially if it's after midnight, is that they need to call for help. Like, let me phone a friend. And so they call a subject matter expert. It could be a manager, a supervisor, another peer, and they say, "Hey, you've had this problem. Can you talk me through it?" And you might hear the voice on the other end say, "Who is this? Who's calling me at 2 a.m.?" And that's if it's early. So if you have the human capability out there that answers the call and talks them through, well, that's great. The solution is implemented and everybody wins. It's not scalable and it's definitely not available 24/7 like we like it to be. So we educate our AI as you would train a subject matter expert. You give it the SOPs, you give it the maintenance manual, the operating manual, all the updates. You put that in a box and you put guardrails on it. We have two AI layering LLMs, one that just interprets the information, and the second that actually interfaces with the human. And that interface with the human, it sounds like you, it sounds like me, it sounds like your favorite person in the world, especially if it's 2 a.m. and nobody else is on the phone. It can sense when you are in a hurry, it can sense when you're impatient. It will be infinitely patient, it will be infinitely helpful. And what Pocket Mentor does, it doesn't just cookie cut an answer because it doesn't know what the question is. It works and it actually thinks. Everything that practical AI does, the AI thinks with the human, not for the human. And this is where you get the best of both worlds. The humans on the job, they they have this earbud in their ear and they're having a conversation just like they would with you or me, but it's to the same knowledge domain, but it's available and it's available to everybody at almost no cost compared to having subject matter experts and senior engineers retainer that just sit there waiting by the phone.
I think that's a brilliant idea. I've just been working with a facilities management organization that's just supporting, hundreds of facilities. Now they have new people coming in and out all the time. They have contractors working with them. They have permanent staff. They go out to a site. They've never been there before. Like, where do I start? And I mean, if they had that tool with them, they could say, well, I'm at the switchboard here. The air conditioning unit is not working. Well, the machine would tell it, well, this was just serviced 6 months ago. It's got a history of this. It's got these are the things that have typically gone wrong with it. This is how you would fix it. This is the manual for it. You know, all the stuff that you would normally have in a drawer, they would have it instantly available to them that they could service that particular air conditioning unit without having to call back to base and get some info if they're providing that service. It sounds like a brilliant idea. How's it been going for you?
Well, it's enjoyable doing the work. It's AI, so there's that barrier to entry almost everywhere. Adoption, you mentioned earlier that it's
Yeah,
going to take a while for AI to be adopted. I agree. That's
yeah,
the human factor of it. Over here, at least, we in leadership development, we in communication training, we call it change management.
yeah.
And it doesn't have to be technology. It could be, hey, we're changing the color of the front door. And as soon as if somebody just employees just showed up and they saw the doors a different color, somebody's going to gripe about it. But there's those early adopters that go say, hey, everybody, we've got a new paint job on our door. And then there's going to be those ones that they're the objectors, right? They're
Yeah,
going to say it's bad, even if it's the
mm,
best thing since sliced bread, because their mind doesn't have a chance
yeah,
to acclimate. We all
yeah,
go through a cycle, the early
yeah,
adopters, the late adopters, and in the middle. So,
yeah,
whatever change is happening, it's important to
yeah.
introduce the target of that change early on, engage your client base, your customer base, your employee base, talk it over. Even if you don't change a thing, giving your employees the opportunity to speak their mind eliminates that pressure. It takes that weight off their shoulders. So when it is finally implemented, they're not surprised. They've already expressed all their concerns, and their concerns were either addressed or appeased. And by the time the adoption comes in, you start out more at a 90% adoption rate than doing it cold with only a 10% adoption rate, which turns into a tug of war between, well, we're just going to be obstinate and object simply because we want to, right? We just got
Mm.
that crawl stuck to. So yeah, any barrier that's out there, it's usually human. The technology is there for us to use at will, but just educate your employees. It helps smooth out that barrier.
It's interesting about what, some of the noise that organizations have to deal with. They change the paint color on the door, for example, and that creates all sorts of different noise and it takes people away from the real work. And I guess we maybe had to paint the doors because they needed to be repainted. So we chose a different
Oh,
color.
give you can I give you a what if on that the door color?
Yeah,
So what it sounds like it's like it would never hurt anybody, right? Like, hey, we're
yeah.
just changing the door color. It's not hurting anybody. But what if the entire delivery community was given instructions that said, go to building 3 and go to the third red door?
Hmm,
Now, look at
yeah.
the impact, that cascading impact on
Oh,
something.
yes,
And if you
yes,
give your employees time to respond, somebody's going to raise their hand and say, hey,
yeah.
we need to change the delivery instruction.
That's a brilliant analogy. The first thing that comes to mind is that Mick Jagger Rolling Stone song, Paint It Black. Had a red
There
door.
you
What
go.
was it?
There you go.
I can imagine that would be, that some of those, there's hidden meanings in how buildings have been set up and how people navigate them. So there would be some consequences of changing those things without letting people know. Who's trialing it at the moment? Do you have any companies trialing your particular software?
We have we have a couple local manufacturers that are working with it right now. We've got a in the neurodiverse or neurodivergent space. We're supporting a organization of 1 million that is using AI that we built to give independence to the neurodivergents who wouldn't otherwise be able to live on their own. So it's a way for them to pick up the phone. And for those that don't have a parent or a grandparent to ask questions, it's a way to get those questions answered so they can become sovereign, live on their own, and be productive citizens.
And what are you looking for, like, right now? If somebody was out there listening to this podcast and hearing you talk about Pocket Mentor, what's your ideal organization that you want to work with this tool?
Any facility that has downtime because of knowledge loss or knowledge that's missing, or you were in fear of knowledge walking out the door. And it happens when our employees retire. Toyota talks about this inner factory, this autonomous factory. All the knowledge is in the brain power of the employees, but not written down. So if you're concerned about something like that, let's get everything documented and have a good method to transition from generation to generation.
Yeah, I'm sure that any facility managers out there that are hearing this, I'll put some show notes in about how you can reach out to Derek. One of the things that just came to mind was I had on this podcast a lady based in New York. She's in the information governance space, or you could call it records management, where she's working with facilities that are literally acres and acres of shelving with boxes. And to get from one end of the building to another, you need a bicycle or a scooter or something because it's too far to walk. So think of that context. You've got a huge warehouse full of paperwork, and you've got one person in charge of the whole facility, and that person has got a giant spreadsheet. And in that giant spreadsheet, it tells you what's in every box. Now, that's not the end of the story. Imagine that person has a medical episode and has to suddenly leave and is unable to come back to work ever again. You have got this mountain of paperwork, one spreadsheet. You've got to work out where everything is. And that has been the story of her life, is organizations that have been relying on this key person dependency for many years until that person is no longer able to do that role. And that's what I see at a lot of organizations. There's that one person that's been there for 30 years. They know how everything works. They know how everything hangs together, but it's all in their head. Isn't that what you're saying, Derek? Isn't that the problem you
It
solve?
is.
Yeah,
It is, and it's scary. A lot of the workers, the frontline workers in manufacturing are at retirement age. They've been retiring for the last decade. They're going to retire for the next decade. And then there's a big gap.
yeah,
There's a vacuum there. So we're bringing in people that have good intentions, but they might even be book learned, as my
yeah.
grandparents used to say, but they don't have that experience. And that experience combined with knowledge is what helps get you through the day, helps keep everything running.
Yeah, yeah. So that's brilliant. Well, great. Best of luck with that. I think that's a great idea. I just want to ask you a couple more questions on a bit of a lighter note. So another podcast that you might be interested in is called the Nostalgic Nerds. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
It
It's
sounds like one I would like.
yes, yes. Well, I got into it. It's hosted by Renee Murphy, and she's into AI governance a little bit like me, and that's how I ended up learning about this particular podcast. But it's hilarious. So every so on, she posts a podcast about some technology advancement and goes through the history of it and how we are today. Like she did washing machines, or she does TVs, or all that sort of stuff. It's brilliant. Anyway, she did an episode on Jello, and I just wanted to ask you, what's been your experience growing up with Jello? Tell me a little bit about what Jello has meant for you.
But you mean like the food, the
Yeah, the
JELL?
yeah, yeah, the Jello.
Well, I remember all the commercials for it just showed it moving and wiggling. So it was happy, fun treat.
Yes. Did you ever have it as a child? Did your mum make it for you, and was it a common thing in your house?
I don't know if it's common that maybe holidays we would have a Jello big like brownie dish and sliced up. I would see it most often at school, grade
Yeah.
school, and that it'd be a nice little single serving that they would put up on the food line.
There you go. That's what I'm getting to. So what was your favorite flavor?
Cherry.
Cherry. So here in Australia, we had a similar concept. We had a little plastic container, and we'd fill it full of green, or it was lime flavored Jello. But inside that container, before it set, we would put a chocolate frog, and we would call it Frog in a Pond. And it became a thing like over here. So every birthday party from the age of about 5 till about 15, parents all over Australia would prepare this frog in a pond. And it was something that was just part of our culture. Now I wanted to call out Renee because she never mentioned in her podcast about Jello, about the frog in the pond. And I think it's because the good people in the US never had the pleasure of experiencing a frog in a pond. And so she never got to see that. But it was very, very popular here in Australia as something we had growing up. And so I've invited Renee to come on this podcast, and I'm hoping she will soon. She's had a few challenges with dogs and some health issues, and I'm hoping that sometime soon that we can connect. But what I've been finding with the podcast community is that I'm finding all of these interesting people, a bit like yourself, Derek, Renee, that lady in New York. It's Phyllis Ellen, who I interviewed a few weeks ago. She was on the podcast, just fascinating people all over the world. And it's just opened up a whole world of opportunity of knowing what's going on in AI around the world. So thank you for coming on today. I've been thoroughly enjoyed hearing what you're doing and what you're doing next. But there's one thing I do with all of the guests is I got a little book, which is one of my favorite books. It's this one here. Now, we need to keep this G-rated for family reasons, but what I'm asking you to do now is pick a number between 1 and 150.
Okay. Do you want me to tell you out loud?
Yeah, pick a number.
Okay. It's 121.
121. Okay, so in this book, it's made up of 150 quotes about life, the universe, and everything. And you said 121.
Yes.
So on that page, I'll read you that quote. And if you could have a think about this quote and tell me what this quote means for you. Okay, you ready?
Let's go for it.
It is advisable that a person know at least three things: where they are going, and what they do best under the circumstances. What does that mean?
I would agree. You can't get anywhere unless you know where you're starting or you're going. That's your reason for getting up each day. And what was the third part of that quote,
What you do
Bruce?
best.
Okay, I preach this to everybody, probably more than that they want to hear. But I truly believe that everybody in the world should have one thing that they do better than anyone else in the world. It gives yourself some value, and that one thing could be making frog in a pond better than anybody else, or having the
Yeah.
most colors. It could be something that everybody knows about. It could be something nuanced that nobody's ever heard. But as soon as you start telling the story, you'll get everybody's interest. And whether you believe you're a speaker or not a speaker, you'll have people around you listening in because you're sharing something with them that they've never heard before. And I tell this to the neurodivergent class because we have trouble connecting a lot. So if there's one thing that you do better than anybody else, word will spread. People will start seeking you out and helping you just because you're giving them knowledge that they've never had before.
That's brilliant, Derek. So, for all the listeners out there, you've been listening to the Hitchhiker's Guide to AI Governance, the podcast for anyone trying to make sense of intelligent machines, messy politics, and everything in between. But don't panic. Today I was speaking with Derek Crager. So, Derek, how do people get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Well, you see my name. Feel free to Google me. I come up quite a bit there. My Human First AI is out in a book, and you can read the first chapter. I don't even ask for an email address because I don't plan on spamming anybody. But if your listeners and viewers go to humanfirstai.net, they can grab that first chapter.
Right. And when is the book coming out?
The book is now out. Yes, the
Oh, it's
audiobook
out.
came out earlier this year, and the
Right.
print version just came out last month.
Okay. So I thought it was still yet to be published, but you have published the book.
I have, yeah. I
Excellent.
think I know why you have that sense is I need to update my media kit.
Yes. So what if you could kindly give me a link to that book so that I can share that in the show notes, and maybe in a few months or 6 months time, or how you're going with your Pocket Mentor tool, we'll catch you back on. I'd love to talk about how your book's gone, because that's sort of something that would be really interesting for people to hear about, your new book.
Well, I'd like to do that for sure. Sounds good, Bruce.
Yeah, thank you very much, Derek.